It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. It is, I had to make sure. It's Thursday here on Steelers Afternoon Drive. Alan, how are we feeling?
Not like it's Thursday because I spent all day at my house working on the website. We're transferring over some stuff and technical stuff that's probably very uninteresting to everyone, but it meant a lot of work from home for me today. So Aaron Becker covered practice, and I'm vaguely aware of what happened at practice, but I'm feeling a bit lost. One of the things that I think, if I can talk good on us for a minute, Smitty, one of the things I think makes us good at this is that I am there every day, and that I don't think there's a lot of other people that are doing this that are. And then I think like you bring a different perspective. Like it's a good interplay, right? Someone who's there and someone who's there all the time and someone who's there's never. And like you think of things that I would never think of and vice versa. And I think it makes it good. And when I'm not there, the whole thing just falls apart. Like I just feel totally lost. So bear with us. This may not be a record-breaking show, but we're gonna make it happen.
We both become me, except you're not wearing the fan hat. We both just become.
I got a hat. I mean, I can be.
Is yours? It'd be sweet.
More Smitty, a little bit.
Sweet. It was the exact same hat, but it was a frown.
Where's your hater hat? I mean, you need that.
It's over there. Actually, I still have it from the gift from last Christmas. But anyways, Alan, first thing I want to get into, you wouldn't have had to have been at practice to get this report, the injury report coming out, and I'll tell you. Steelers getting healthy at the right time of year. Full participation from Calvin Austin III, Cory Trice, who they activated as we expected to have happen, Alex Highsmith, and Montravius Adams. So the only DNP was Cam Hayward due to rest. Not a single limited participant today at practice. This is the right time of year to start getting healthy, and the Steelers are trending in that direction, obviously. We actually did get a question about one guy, though, we can bring up here in a second. But certainly looks like they're going to be as healthy as they've been all season when they hit the ground running Sunday.
I'm not sure I've ever seen a practice report in week 14. Just everybody's good. There is no practice report today. It's fine. That's pretty crazy. I can't ever remember that happening. That just like the whole team is healthy. That's pretty notable. So yeah, it's coming at a good time. I think in general, before we talk about the specifics, I think in general, if you remember the last game between the Steelers and the Browns, the Steelers had a lot that was working in their disadvantage. You had the short week, you had the travel, right? They had been, they had to go on the road to Cleveland on that short week. They were banged up, right? They're missing Alex Highsmith. They're missing a couple of other important pieces on that team, and then the weather conditions kind of made for a bringing together of talent levels that let the Browns win. And now, like just 2 weeks later, I feel like all that's turned on its head. Like in 2 weeks' time. Now this time, the Browns are coming to Pittsburgh on their short week. They played on Monday Night Football. They played on Monday Night Football in Denver, which means they did it in altitude, and they're flying back from the West Coast, so they got jet lag involved. And now they're traveling, coming to Pittsburgh, 2 hours by bus, which it's like the closest city to Pittsburgh, but like the bus trip is not great for the legs. And so I just think, and now the Steelers, as healthy as they've ever been, the Browns, I would not say especially banged up, but Sid Tillman doesn't seem like he's going to play. It's still in the concussion protocol and not practicing. And, it seems like everything is coming up Steelers right now in terms of all those things that were flipped the other direction just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we're going to give predictions tomorrow, so I don't want to get into that, but I feel very differently than how I did about how that game was going to go. I know that I picked the Steelers to win, but thought it would be a very hideous game and certainly could go either way. I'll just say I'm not necessarily feeling that way as we sit just a few days out of Steelers-Browns Part 2. So the player that was asked about, though, Kevin B wanted to know if there's anything on Roman Wilson. Have we seen him start to do anything yet? Obviously, they haven't had him practice and open up that 21-day window or anything like that, but anything to report on Roman?
Yeah, just running. Not practicing yet, but I have seen him running and seen him around the building. I don't know where he is on a return. The second time around hamstring injury, team is going to be very cautious. And then just in general, his situation where you got a rookie who's now missed almost the entirety of his rookie year. How much is he legitimately going to be able to do even when he comes back? Probably not very much. So, like, there's not really any rush, I don't think, on getting him back. I do expect them to try to at some point, but like, I don't even know that they really want him at this particular moment. Like, like, would he dress if he was on the 53?
I don't know. That's what I was going to ask you.
Like, I don't think so. Not with what they've been getting out of Ben Skoranek the last couple of weeks. Like, I think probably not. And Cory Trice is in that situation too. He's back on the 53, but I don't think he's going to dress this week either. James Pierre's been doing such a good job covering punts. I mean, I guess they could replace him, but if they were going to replace James Pierre covering punts, they could have just cut him. Like, they don't need him for anything else. So him still being on the roster tells me James Pierre is still covering punts. And Cam Sutton and Beanie Bishop have the nickel and dime rules locked down. Maybe there's a matchup where you want a bigger guy on the inside or something, but I think it's going to be tough for Cory to get back in the rotation right away.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about Roman Wilson just because, and this takes me into a question that we got here from Mark P. Jr. He was talking about the emergence of Calvin Austin. We spent a lot of this year talking about the need to go and get a receiver. They obviously end up trading a 5th-round draft pick for Mike Williams during the trade deadline. And a lot of people have obviously been, like, hey, where's Mike Williams? Where's Mike Williams week in and week out? But how much of the impact that Calvin Austin has given them, 5 total touchdowns this year, the volume necessarily hasn't been there, but he seems to be able to make some splash plays and become that type of player at the very least, stretch the field. How much has he maybe eased the lack of not having another weapon like that across from George Pickens in your mind?
Well, it's kind of two different roles. I always thought Calvin Austin could do what he's doing. I'll tell you what, I think I started the Calvin Austin hype train in Mobile, his pre-draft year. He came in, he was like a late add to the Senior Bowl roster. I was like, this guy is awesome. I interviewed him at the Combine, wrote a nice story about him. And look, I that happens to me every year where I like hype up guys that I like that are like late round picks that are probably not going anywhere. And I'm not saying I'm right every time. And usually they don't end up in Pittsburgh, but he did. And I think he's always been capable of doing this. I'm not surprised by it at all. I thought if you ever got a competent offensive coordinator and a competent quarterback in there, that you would see Calvin Austin doing the things that he's doing. I'm not surprised by it at all. I don't think it really has anything to do with Mike Williams. I think there's room for more production from the other outside receiver spot. Van Jefferson showed you that there's room for it there. I mean, I just think it hasn't been as consistent as they would like. Like the crazy part about 414 yards passing for Russell Wilson is that he does it with George Pickens and 1/2 of Calvin Austin. Like, that's the real crazy part about that number, is that this is still not a very good group of wide receivers, and Calvin missed half the game, and he's probably the second best of them. So, I mean, I think that's pretty incredible stuff. But yeah, I'm not at all surprised by what I've seen from Calvin Austin. I kind of always knew he had this in him. I thought that, the sort of hype train got ahead of things a little bit when he missed a year with an injury. And like, I don't think he's ever going to be a guy who's averaging 5 catches a game, but I think he can provide fairly regularly that big playability down the seam that he has so far.
Calvin Austin was in Mobile the same year that Kenny was. That was 22 when he came out. And I remember being there as well and watching him, and a much better route runner than I think people thought that he was. Like, I think a lot of people just thought like he was a pure speed guy, just take the top off, but he can run better routes. than I think people give him credit for. The one thing that I was concerned about was obviously missing an entire year. I was like, okay, how's he going to bounce back from this? If there was something that would hinder him becoming a legit weapon at the NFL level, I thought it would be that, but it would be missing a year. And then, going into this year, we talked about the connection that he had with Russell Wilson in the spring, but then it's Justin Fields that starts the season. You really didn't see a lot of Calvin Austin to begin with. And I was like, oh boy, is that going to play, not in his favor, the fact that he doesn't have Russell Wilson and all of a sudden he's not going to be a part of this offense and fall out of favor. But then Russell Wilson gets back in there, and you've obviously seen the fruit be bared since that. So I'm a fan of Calvin Austin. I think he can certainly be a legit weapon for them, but I don't think that makes, the burden to go and get another weapon at some point for this offense, whether it is, early in the draft next year, whatever, if it's T. Higgins, like Mike Tomlin wants, any less. So that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Talked about Russell Wilson within there. We actually have a couple talking points that involve Russ here. One is a question. One is revolving around Art Smith's availability today. Of course, you weren't necessarily there, but we got the talking points from this great thing called Twitter. And he talked about one of these things doesn't necessarily have to do so much as Art's comments about it, but he talked about, Russ making checks at the line of scrimmage and stuff like that. And going back to last year, we didn't see them audible, or Matt Canada's time in general, not just last year, but in Matt Canada's tenure, we really didn't see them check anything to the line of scrimmage. Very clearly, Russ has a full command of what he wants to do. And just another talking point in terms of why this offense is very different under Art Smith than what it was under Matt Canada. I mean, I talked about how, in that game, going back and watching, I felt like Russ was winning every rep before the ball was even in his hands, like pre-snap. He knew what was going on. A lot of that was because if they didn't have the right play from the jump, he was checking into the right play because of what he was seeing. So, Alan, what's your take on all of that?
Yeah, and even when this is not even a shot at like Kenny Pickett, like they didn't do any of that last year. They didn't do that in 2021 when they had Ben Roethlisberger either, which is just insane that they tried to run an NFL offense with no, and look, it's fine to have a college offense that way. I don't trust college quarterbacks to be changing the play at the line of scrimmage. And most college defenses are not going to do the things to you that NFL defenses are going to do to you when they, line up like they're going to do one thing and then change their look multiple times, or have players that can provide, like is Deshaun Elliott a safety or linebacker? I don't know. Depends on how he lines up. Is Patrick Queen a safety or linebacker? I don't know. Depends on how he lines up. Like you don't have college teams that are doing that to you. And the biggest failing of Matt Canada was that he never adjusted to the level. Like, he was a good college offensive coordinator. He was really good at Pitt. What he did at Maryland was like nothing short of a miracle. And he was good for that level, but he never adjusted to the reality of what you have to work with and what you're going up against at the NFL level. And that's why his passing concepts never worked. Like, if you line up in the NFL looking like you're going to do something, and then you do that thing you're looking like you're going to do 100% of the time, you are never going to be successful doing that thing because the other guys are too smart. They'll figure it out. And so Russell Wilson is such a cheat code in that regard. I think it's one of the reasons why when Mike Tomlin was looking for an addition to the quarterback room, even maybe before they had decided to move on from Kenny Pickett, that a guy like Russell Wilson with that knowledge was something they really wanted. I think the hope was that maybe it could rub off, and maybe the hope here is it'll rub off on Justin Fields. I don't know, but I think they've got a really good thing going with Art's offense. And like, this is the best quarterback Arthur Smith has ever had too. Like, we talked about him, like that you hired Arthur Smith as the guy who's done it without the quarterback. And I don't think Russ is, he's not an elite franchise quarterback. He's not Burrow, he's not Lamar, he's not Josh Allen, but he's certainly been better than any of the other quarterbacks that Arthur Smith has had. And that it's showing, that's for sure.
And while I certainly agree that he's not elite, he still has a couple of elite traits to him that I think get accentuated within this offense. So I think that's what makes it such a good pairing. And now, they are within, which I think that you said was probably going to happen. You said after they play Cincinnati, they're going to be a top 10 scoring offense. Exactly at number 10 right now with Arthur Smith. In maybe 1 week after people wanted him gone, wanted him to either take that UNC job or him fired, which again just goes back to the conversation. Not only how ridiculous that is, but most fan bases just do not like their offensive coordinators. But talking about Russ within there, M-Rob wanted to know, do we think that he will be back? Would he want to come back? What do you think that it looks like? Do we expect that there will be outside interest for Russ? Kind of how do we see the entire offseason playing out? This has been one of the things, like going back before the season started, was so intriguing to me about the idea of going and getting Justin Fields and also getting Russ on a 1-year deal, because something's got to give there. Both those guys only on 1-year contracts for this team. So how do we see this playing out as we sit here right now?
I think Russell Wilson will be back. I don't know what the contract is going to look like. I don't know what he wants. I don't know the Steelers are going to want to make it work, but I think he's coming back. I think he's been good enough. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't want to come back. I don't see any reason why the Steelers wouldn't want him back. They'll have to make the money work, but I think they will. Russ has made a whole lot of money in his career. Certainly is going to want to be paid, but I don't think I also think, like, after what happened in Denver, it's probably not the most important thing to him either. Just in terms of the absolute value amount of the contract. I don't think, there's sometimes, like, a lot of players will look at the contract and it's like you look at somebody else's number and you say, well, I'm better than him, so I got to have one more dollar than he has, like, that was the whole thing with Ayuk and Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Where, like, he wanted that contract. I think Russ is kind of beyond that at his age, where, like, I don't think he's going to care if he makes less than Derek Carr to come back and play with the Steelers, where he's very happy and feels like he can contend for another Super Bowl. Like, I just think he's going to be willing to take the deal that makes it work for everyone. I'm not saying he's not going to cost a lot of money. He is. Starting quarterbacks cost a lot of money, but I think it'll be within reason, and I think the Steelers will pay it.
I agree. I'm glad I saw people talking about the Derek Carr thing. I also saw people throwing out, like, Baker Mayfield's number, Geno Smith's number. Those guys have been good, obviously, in their situations, though, as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think if you're talking, like $30-ish million per season, like,
this may be a hot take. I think they can maybe get him for a little less than that. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I'm
especially if they're willing to guarantee a lot of it.
Yeah. Somebody asked me about this, and they sent me a screenshot back of what starting quarterbacks made to make their argument. I said, I fully get it. I understand. Because I said I think it's going to be like 26 to 28.
Yeah. So, like, here's the thing. The number is meaningless. Russ is 36. So, okay.
Yeah.
Let's say it's a 3-year deal. Okay. 30, that's years 37, 38, and 39. Okay. If it's 3 years, 120 million, but it's 20, 20, 80, and the 80 isn't guaranteed, well, that's just monopoly money, my friends. That doesn't mean anything. Like, you can make the number whatever you want to make it. He's never going to see a penny of that $80 million. So, like, I think you're probably looking like, maybe even year to year, to be perfectly honest. Like, I think they'll make it work, but I think fully guaranteed is where the Steelers will be headed here. Where, like, they're going to guarantee the significant portion of this, and therefore I don't think the total will be as outlandish as some contracts are, because those totals are inflated by that number, but that number is useful for younger players because it becomes the starting point for negotiations for the next deal. I don't know that Russ cares about that at this point in his career.
The other part of that was, do we think that there will be outside interest from teams?
Probably, but I think the Steelers will get a deal done in January before anything else can happen.
Yeah,
January.
I agree. I mean,
I said January, but I mean.
Oh yeah. You mean February?
I might mean February. I might mean February. January seems unlikely. Now that the more I think about it, January seems unlikely.
Love to hear it. The other part of what Arthur Smith said that we wanted to bring up, he gave credit to George Pickens for something today. Talked about his practice habits and said that the last couple weeks are as good as he's seen from any player that he's coached. What do we make of that, Alan? And you've obviously been around him practicing quite a bit. So do you kind of co-sign that sentiment?
I think you've seen a different George Pickens at practice this year. I was actually just thinking that the other day. I posted a video of Calvin Austin being back, but I posted the whole line of wide receivers. And, first rep out. There's George shadowing Zach Azani, like demonstrating the drill for everybody else. Then he's the first one out. It goes really hard. And then everyone kind of falls behind. And like, that is not what it used to look like. I think that is a far more engaged player in practice. And I think that's worth mentioning. That's significant.
Yeah.
That, I think in general, despite what we've seen occasionally, I do think there's been growth shown by George Pickens. I don't know if it's enough growth for the Steelers to pay him $100 million this offseason, but I do think you've seen a player in many ways trending in the right direction, not just in terms of his on the field in between the whistles play, which has been outstanding, but like, the hurting the team has been somewhat minimized. He's still on his teammates' nerves. I know that with his, eye black message, and there's a whole bunch of unforced errors there, but I do think there have been in some areas some steps forward.
Okay. And I think it's important to highlight those too, just to show that we don't just talk about the negatives when they happen for George Pickens, but also highlight the positives. I mean, I'm not somebody that would ever question if you're being fair in terms of the way that you cover a player, obviously, because I know you. But for the people that tune into maybe like one episode every now and then, or just see a clip here or there that we post or something like that, they might think that we're targeting him similarly to the way that they view, other people in the media targeting him. And that's obviously never going to be the case here. That. I know that. I'm hopeful that a lot of people,
everybody knows,
the audience know
I
that.
only target Justin Fields. So, like, I mean,
and that's only because Mason Rudolph's no longer here.
Right.
It's something with that number 2. That's what it is. If Justin Fields isn't here next year, I don't know what's going to happen. Somebody else wearing that too.
It's going to be like the punter or something.
Well,
no way. Corliss is back. It's not going to be the punter.
Well, okay. So I was going to ask you about that. Actually, I was just thinking about that because I was going back and watching highlights from the beginning of the season, and obviously Cam Johnston got hurt. So you think like they're just going to unfortunately move on from him and roll forward with?
I don't know about that, but I just saw Cam at practice yesterday, and he's still wearing like the piece of Iron Man armor.
Wow.
So like I think it's probably doubtful that he's ready for the start of the season.
Jeez.
So yeah, I think Corliss Waitman's back for next season.
Okay.
And then we'll see what happens. I mean, maybe he gets back at some point, but yeah, I mean,
that's just, that's unfortunate. Obviously, the way it's not like he got outperformed or anything like that and lost his job. You just hate to see it happen like that. You mentioned to me before we started recording that you talked to Zack Frazier this week, and we talked about on that short week against Cleveland how we thought that he specifically had a pretty rough game, like his first bad one that he's had in the NFL. And obviously he's got a little bit of a redemption game coming up this upcoming Sunday, and I'm sure that he's, licking his lips waiting to get to Sunday.
Yeah, you could tell Zack Frazier was trying very hard to not say anything bulletin boardy, but was also trying to express his enthusiasm for getting to play the Browns again. He was like, yeah, I really, really want that one over. Like, I just, I want it again. And he's like, yeah, like they're really good. And I want another shot. And like, I think that's, as a wrestler, I think that's the mindset, right? Like when you get beat, like you just want to get back out there. And I thought that offensive line was awesome against the Bengals, partially just because they had just got their butts kicked and they were like, some of the Browns' aggression got worn by guys wearing tiger stripes on Sunday, I think. But there's some left. I think they're ready to prove that was a fluke. I think that's definitely the vibe I'm getting from those young interior offensive linemen this week.
And lucky for him, it's a team in the division, so he does get a redo at this thing going against Cleveland again.
It's like time thing for rookies. There are no redos in college football. You got to wait a whole year.
Yep. So it's almost like he gets either like, I don't know if you want to look at it like a championship rematch, if you're like you said, you want to throw in the wrestling analogy, or he's got a Money in the Bank briefcase that he's about to cash in on Sunday. So we'll see how that performance goes for him, but I'm certainly looking forward to that. Alan, we got an interesting question here from Christopher Sexton. I feel like he's good for these all the time, digging into beyond the football stuff for us lately. So he says, how did you and I, he wants to know about how you and I met. How did the podcast start? How long has it been going? What made you guys start the podcast? what are the long-term goals for it? And he even asked me about my job outside of here as well. So I guess we'll start with that, and then we can dive into more about you and I, the podcast. So my job, very boring. Work from home, but I work for a company called Retail Data Systems. It's a point of sale company. So go to your local grocery store. You got self-checkouts, fast lanes, whatever you would call them, in the register terminals, credit card terminals. Those are installed by us and then supported by us. So I take the calls for them. We have about 700 customers in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Delaware, New York, Virginia, Connecticut, and do support and service for those grocery stores. My job is logging the calls, giving them to whatever person is closest to them in the area, if it's a service call, or putting it on the support board. And then I also do the invoicing and billing for the customers at the beginning and end of each month. So pretty boring stuff. Now back to this podcast and how it started.
So if
Alan,
you
actually
go to the grocery store and you get overcharged for your peaches, you just go straight to Smitty and complain. Just cut out the middleman and just go directly to Smitty and be like, it was supposed to be $2.39 a pound and it rang up as $2.69 and I want my 48 cents.
Yeah. Probably a batch issue with
that's
the system.
Zachary Smith _ PGH. Just send all those directly to him.
Please don't. Somebody's going to do that. Anyways, Alan, you went back and found in terms of like the first interaction, because I actually had a different Twitter account at the time when we would have first met. To answer the question of how we first met, I mean, it's through social media. A lot of my friendships have been formed through social media. This is one of them.
Yeah, so I went back and found the first. Yeah, it's funny because Twitter won't like you. I guess the account doesn't exist anymore, so I can't see what you tweeted, but I can just see that we were in a tweet thread together in 2017 about whether or not Adam Frazier was going to be an opening day starter for the Pittsburgh Pirates, along with some of our fellow mutuals like Tyler from North Shore 9, good Pirates podcast if you're into that kind of thing. And yeah, so there you go. That was the
Adam
start.
Frazier, John Jaso, Nick Kingham, those guys made their way in that thread.
Yeah.
Which
Well, I said it was possible that Frazier would be an opening day starter in this thread, but he turned out not to be. So I was wrong. No, I guess he was. Wait, I lied.
2017?
He started in left field.
Ooh. Okay.
There you go. So I was right.
You were right.
But I said he would be at second, but he was in left.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's why. Well, I think everybody would have thought if he was going to, it would be at second, and then all of a sudden, bam, left field. How did the podcast start? We talked about this quite a bit, but honestly, I mean, Alan, this is your site. This is what you wanted to do. So I guess you could tell the people again.
I had always had the thought that I wanted a podcast. I felt like I would be good at it. I didn't know what to talk about, but like dating back to like before I was strictly covering the Steelers, and I didn't. I felt like the idea of doing it by myself was intimidating. I didn't want to like. I don't know. I just didn't feel like it was going to work. Or maybe it would. I mean, obviously it does okay because I do it every morning now. But like I don't know, it was just something about it that I didn't know anything about. That was the other thing. I didn't know anything about like how to make it make money, how to make it work. And so I learned a bunch of things over the years. I got into a place where I was just covering the Steelers, and I really felt like I don't know what the inspiration was or how it came to me, but I felt like the idea of this format was one that was going to work. And I knew that Smitty had been doing around 412 for a really long time. I knew his work in other places was pretty good and came pretty well recommended. And I had actually tried to hire you before. I think that was the first time.
That's the first time we met in person. Yeah.
In person. And I didn't know where you were in life, what you were doing, what you were interested in doing, but I felt like this was a fit that could work. And I don't know. I would have to go back and find the conversation that started. Maybe someday I'll find whether that was a DM or a text or whatever, the conversation that started Steelers Afternoon Drive. But Yeah, I mean, I kind of pitched it to you. You were like, yes. And I was like, oh, that was easy. And then it took a long time from the yes to come together, like months,
Yeah.
if I remember right.
Mm-hmm. But I'm also, it would have been fine, I'm sure, right out of the gate. But I think taking our time is also what made it such a good product. Like as soon as we hit the ground running with the logo, with the video, with the format of doing it. So like I don't necessarily have a regret in terms of the
Oh,
amount of time that
no.
it took. Yeah.
None. I think it was well thought out. Like we had a whole list of things that we needed to do. Yeah. Yeah.
What he the other I think that you kind of answered the rest of this within that, like what made us start the podcast. It's a different format than what you'll see like anywhere else. I mean, we actually kind of talked about it at the beginning with Alan not being at practice today, but when he said when he is there, obviously the dynamic that we're able to provide with the two of us together, that's kind of the idea here because, where else can you get that? I'm not saying that it's completely out of the realm of possibility. There's nobody else doing it, but it is relatively unique. If you can find another one, let me know. With the fan perspective, along with somebody that's around the team literally every single day. So I think that we both agree that it was a dynamic that wasn't being tapped into enough and something we wanted to dive into.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, that's what I think that, like I said, the open, I think that's what makes it good. And I better get back to work or I'm not going to be holding up my end of the bargain. So hopefully, knock on some wood here, everything that we did today on the website works and continues to work, and then I can go to practice tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm about to have to post this for the first time since it's changed. So I'm about to, tap in myself and see what kind of changes we're talking about here. But Alan, until tomorrow, tell the people they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Go there and check it out. It looks slightly different. Otherwise, it's mostly the same.
Okay. I was just saying, I asked yesterday, like if anything was to change with the interface for the users, but
it does look a little different. I'll be honest, I'm not like enthralled with the way it looks, so I'm gonna keep tweaking it until we get to something I like better.
Well, there we go. Like, subscribe.
I'll tell you what. The big reason that we made the change and what does work is that it loads way faster. So I am very that was the driving force of the changes that we made. So if you are used to the old Steelers Now, click doodly do. Oh, there's my story. No, it is like instant. So we got that down, and that's what I'm really happy about.
That was the afternoon driving force behind making the switch. Hit us in the comments with your thoughts on anything that we talked about today. A question for a future episode. Of course, hit that bell as well so you don't miss an episode of this Morning Rush Sights and Sounds Steelers Spotlight with Aaron Becker on Saturdays. All that good stuff. As well as anything else that's posted here. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else. Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, you'll find us there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok, and then you'll find me everywhere. Zachary Smith, PGH. Round Saunders and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.